That does indeed wrap it up for OSPF for version 6, IP version 6 that is, at this point in your studies. But let's move on to another important topic, and this is going to answer a question that may actually have come into your head quite a while back in this section, because we went over how the ISPs get address blocks, to sell to you and I, the network admins. It starts at IANA, then the RIRs get the smaller blocks, and the ISPs get their even smaller blocks from them, and then the ISPs keep on subnetting and then sell us the address blocks. But what if we just need to use version 6 on a private basis right now, say in a practice lab? If you've got a lab, do you need to call somebody to get some version 6 addresses to use? And of course, you may be building a practice lab at your business, or a test lab, and start rolling, start saying, before we roll this out, let's work with it for a little while. Well, if you're doing that, do you need to get addresses from the ISP? Well, actually, you don't have to, because what we have in IP version 6 is the unique local unicast address. And this block of addresses is IP version 6's equivalent to the private address ranges in version 4. It's just that we don't have 3 ranges to memorize, all with different masks. We've got one block address to memorize, and I'll tell you what that is in a moment and how we got there. But the benefits and limitations of unique local unicast addresses, this should sound familiar. You don't have to apply to anyone to use the addresses. You just start using them, just like in your home lab or a practice lab at work. If you want to use IP version 4 private address ranges, you don't have to tell anybody. You just start. Also, as you'd expect, these IP version 6 addresses are not routable. They're not guaranteed to be globally unique, but you should try to make them so. And we're going to have more about that in just a minute. That's a very important point when it comes to these addresses. Now, officially, the prefix for these addresses is FC00/7. Now, the thing is, there's a huge block of addresses in there, FC00/8 to be exact, that hasn't been officially recognized as such by the IETF. So in the real world and for your Cisco certification exams, you should know that the actual private address range to use is FD00/8, which means that your unique local unicast addresses should begin with FD and then be followed by a unique 40-bit value. Thankfully, this just happens to leave us a nice, neat 64-bit ID value to bring us to a total of 128 bits. Funny how that worked out. That's pretty cool. Now, though, why do we care about these being globally unique if they're not going to be advertised to anybody else, and they're not routable, and no one else is ever going to see them? Well, let me answer that question with a little real-world story. Now, I live near Richmond, Virginia, and this is an area where quite a few banks used to have major headquarters. Now, we still have a lot of bank HQs in Richmond, but not as many as we used to because we don't have as many banks as we used to. You might have heard a little something about this. There was a bank merger fever a while back, and a lot of smaller banks, including 2 I used to go to, just don't exist anymore. They were sucked up by some of the big boys. And it seemed like every bank HQ in Richmond was soon merging with another large bank HQ. And, of course, that was great business to get. And thankfully, the firm that I worked for got a lot of that networking merging business. But, man, did it seem like every HQ we walked into and every network used the same private address range, 10.0.0.0/8. And this is the sound of my head hitting the desk just even thinking about it. Okay, it's my fist. We'll go with head. Oh, man, it just made merging the networks just a massive pain in the behind. And you can imagine, you walk into 2 giant networks, and they're using the same address ranges. And you're trying to merge them. I mean, it was just a nightmare. Because, hey, I'm hardly lazy. I don't mind hard work. But if you use the same private address range as so many companies out there, it just increases the odds that you'll have to go through what I call a PETA merge one day, a real pain in the arse. And here's the thing. It's so easy to look at that address and that setup and just say, okay, well, I'm going to use subnet 1, host 1, and just go from there. Don't do that. Because this situation with merging, I mean, I know we all think that the company we work for will exist forever, etc., but it doesn't work that way. There are mergers in every business. And this happens so frequently with version 4, as far as the merging problem goes, that there's actually an RFC with IP version 6 that'll help you generate a truly random number for your 40-bit identifier. It's RFC 4193. And again, don't just say, okay, I'm going to subnet this block and I'm going to use subnet 1, host 1, and we'll just count up from there, because there are other people doing that, guarantee you. And if you ever happen to merge with one of these companies, it just makes life a whole lot more difficult than it needs to be. You can also find a lot more information on this address type on the Wikipedia page for this topic. It does go above and beyond the CCENT and CCNA exams, but it is great material to read before you select your company's unique local addresses. That is it for this video. On the next one, we're going to talk briefly about an Unicast subnet address and what you need to know about it. So I'll talk to you on the next vid.